All right. Welcome everyone to the Middlesex County Council meeting, Tuesday, February 22nd, 2022, which is Tuesday 02/22/2022. And I feel like we should have started at 2 o'clock instead of 1 o'clock, just because of that. Anyway, I'm going to call this meeting to order. And as we start, I just want to just tell you a couple things that happened. On February 11th, I attended the Ontario Wardens Caucus AGM, the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus, and was happy to join the Economic Development Committee for this term. As well as dealing with the usual agenda items such as elections, financial reports, one of the presentations was especially interesting. This presentation was the culmination of collaborative research and was over a year in the making. The report, titled Western Ontario Workforce Strategy, had 4 goals. The first, for workforce retention and attraction, collective efforts to attract population and workers to the region. The second, leveraging existing population, aligning post-secondary education with industry needs. Third, attainable housing, providing innovative and compelling options to meet demand. And the fourth being employer recruitment and retention, supporting regional employers with their human resources practices. I strongly urge you to read through this document. There are many aspects that tie into many projects and concerns we are dealing with daily in the county. Some of the subtitles in the report are as follows. Building a welcoming, exclusive community is crucial to attracting and retaining skilled and motivated newcomers. Workforce attraction and retention and access to housing are closely aligned. The post-secondary student population of 135,000 needs to be a primary recruitment ground for employers. 100,000 young people in the region will be reaching working age over the next 5 years. Just those 4 subtitles alone are great conversational jumping off points for us as councillors, for administrators, and our residents of the County of Middlesex. This report was created through federal and provincial funding and is a great example of collaboration between regional governments and our senior partners. I congratulate the members of the Western Ontario Wardens Conference and the creators of this report. I encourage you to read the report and use the information provided for guidance throughout the post-pandemic recovery. The report and the supporting documents can be found at www.workforcestrategy.wowc.ca, and I'll forward that report to anybody who's interested. At this time, I'm going to ask now for a provision of disclosure for pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Not seeing any hands. Moving on to any business arising from the minutes. No. So the minutes of February 8th, 2022, meeting of the County Council, we'd like a motion that to be approved as presented and that we adopt the recommendations of the Committee of the Whole as set out in the minutes of February 8th, 2022. So looking for a mover. Councillor Richard, seconded by Councillor Elliott. Anyone against? Seeing none, or moving on. Any deputations at this time? None? Okay, inquiries or notice of motion? Seeing none, no reports. So now we're going to move on to new business. And this is the Mlps 2021 Response Time Performance Plan Compliance. And I believe Adam's here. I did see him, our Deputy Chief of Operations. Welcome, Adam, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Warden, and through yourself to Council. Each year, Middlesex London Paramedic Service is required to report to the Ministry of Health on ambulance response times. And the deadline for the submission is March 31st. Middlesex London Paramedic Service reports on 6 different targets: sudden cardiac arrests, which is set by the Ministry of Health for their target, and CTAS 1s through 5, whose targets are set by Middlesex County Council. For the year 2021, Middlesex London Paramedic Service met all targets with the exception of sudden cardiac arrest and CTAS 2 calls. There continue to be several factors that challenge these targets, including the need for increased personal protective equipment that paramedics wear going into cardiac arrest calls during COVID, as well as the over-triaging of calls through the current dispatch system. Recently, Middlesex County Council approved some adjustments to the target response times to reflect these challenges, and those came into effect on January 1st of 2022, so they won't be reflected in this report that needs to be submitted for the end of 21. The recommendation is that the report be received for information and that County Council direct the Chief of Middlesex London Paramedic Service to submit the annual report to the Ministry of Health no later than March 31st.
Thank you, Adam. Any questions or comments from our councillors? No. Seeing none, we do have a recommendation that this report be received for information and then that it be submitted to the annual performance report to the Ontario Ministry of Health no later than March 31st, 2021. Mover? Okay, Councillor Burkhart-Jessen, seconded by Councillor Ropp. Anyone against that? Can't imagine there would be. So carried. So now moving on. Thank you, Adam. Thinking now for 8B, which is tender for the Hot Mix Asphalt Contract, MB22. And Ryan, I think you're on board here.
Thank you, Madam Warden. Yep. Through you to Council. I'm presenting the MB22 Hot Mix Asphalt Contract. The low bidder was Coco Paving at $4,944,000 plus HST. They've done decent work for the county in the past, and it's recommended that we accept the bid, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions for Ryan? Oh, Councillor Ropp.
Thank you. Through the warden to Ryan. I was just looking at this and I was wondering about the, excuse me, the amount on the granulars, the fine granulars. Is this based because of our going with the biking lanes? Is that adding cost to that directly, or is that for a different?
So sorry, what item number are you looking at? I think it's on 19.
Yeah, the fine granulars.
Yeah, so that's specifically for a small urban area that we have where the curb and gutter is too narrow. So what we're doing is we're widening out the platform and pushing the asphalt back. So that's where that's come. Yes, it is kind of because of the bike lanes, why we're pushing it back, but that's exactly where it is that small urban.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so we have a motion that the bid of Coco Paving in the amount of, so that's a lot to say, $4,944,000 be before taxes for contract MB22 for the supply of hot mix asphalt be accepted. Mover? Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor Mayhew. Anyone against? So carried. Thank you. Then 8C, tender for cold in place asphalt recycling contract MC22. Ryan, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Warren. Through you to Council. This is for our cold in place contract. The low bid was received by Lavis Contracting for $475,290. And it basically, we've had them work for us in the past, and we've had no issues with their work. It's been good. And we recommend that the tender be accepted. And I'm available to ask any questions if you have them.
Okay. Any questions on this report? All right. So seeing none, looking for a motion to accept this. Councillor DeVitt, seconded by Councillor Corneliuson. Anyone against? So carried. Now we have 8D, request for waiver of land dedication requirement, Quadro Communications Broadband Project. Chris, do you want to speak to this one?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Warden. Maybe I'll walk through the report just for the benefit of council. It's been a while since we've talked about this land dedication policy just in general, and then specifically to this Quadro request that we heard at last county council. Just some background on the project itself. Is a SWIFT approved project for broadband in Middlesex Center. It's about 12 kilometers worth of fiber optic cable that's being installed or proposed to be installed into this project. It's about 144 homes that would be affected or being able potentially be connected to this project. And in particular, the request is around a site that is required for Quadro as a station or an office where they would have broadband infrastructure, sort of like sort of the small Bell telephone stations that are sort of scattered around the county, a building of about that size. And this requires them to sever off a piece of property on Highbury Ave near 8 Mile Road. So just as a background, and it's a long history, well predates my time with the county, for dedication of land for road widening, and talk a little bit about the importance of it. So under the Planning Act, it does give powers to municipalities to make add requirements to different types of planning applications. And in this case, road widening would be a condition we could apply to a plan of subdivision, a plan of condominium, application to a consent or a site plan application. And we've been doing this, I dug back through our history a bit, but from what I could find since about 1982. So it's a long history of us requiring land dedication as a condition of these different planning applications. And back in, I think, 2008, it actually was even more simplified for us to accept these lands as part of our road system, because when they're dedicated under a condition that's noted for road widening, they automatically become part of the public highway. Council may recall years ago, we used to pass these bylaws annually that dedicated all these parcels that we would receive during the year as public highway. We don't have to do that anymore. That's been streamlined. And part of the reason it got streamlined as under the Municipal Act revisions was because this was being done as a common practice throughout Ontario. So in this case, we're looking at our official plan for the prescribed right-of-way widths. And in this particular case, we're looking at the right-of-way widths that's prescribed for Highbury Avenue North. It's one of only a few roads in the county official plans designated as a 4-lane arterial. And as such, we would require land dedication in a rural area measured to 18 meters from the center line of construction of the road. And we'll talk a little bit more about why that's the case a little later in the report. The official plan now prescribes us the ability to take land dedication over retained and severed parcels of land. And again, this happens in many places across the province, including our neighbors in the City of London and some of our neighbors in other counties. So the reason behind this policy is really about providing a public good within the highway system. And our highway system isn't specifically or isn't solely for the purpose of moving cars and trucks and vehicles back and forth. It's also for delivery of infrastructure services and public infrastructure like sewer, water, and broadband in this case, along with hydroelectricity, natural gas. So we have to have enough room within our right of way to allow for all of this infrastructure to be installed. And in a rural area, the additional width is there because we collect stormwater on the surface of the highway along our roadside ditches. So in a rural setting, we need more space in order to accommodate for stormwater drainage versus in an urban area where we would have buried infrastructure, stormwater sewers, for example, catch basins, curbs, and gutters that would collect our stormwater. So there's less of a requirement for space in those urbanized areas. But in this case, it's a rural area. We would need to have that additional widening to allow for installation of all these services and to manage our stormwater. There's a significant advantage to the county and to municipalities to have this power because of the cost of acquiring land to improve our public highway widths. So we've done this and adhered to this policy consistently over the years to allow for us to acquire this land through sound planning in order for us to be able to preserve this land to install future infrastructure like broadband within the right of way without having to go out and do a costly land acquisition across long stretches of roadway. We should note here that just because land is dedicated to the county, and certainly in many cases where land has been part of the public highway for decades, that land is essentially has the continued use of the adjacent landowner. Hundreds of kilometers across this county are farmed within our public highways to the top of the ditch, which in many cases is well within the actual legal property limits of the public highway. And those activities, the county permits to continue for the benefit of both the landowner, who gets a little bit of additional area that they can farm and yield for crops, and also reduces the overall cost for the county to maintain that part of the right of way. If it was just left fallow or let grow to grass or weed, we would cut it through our normal practices. But again, it's better to see that land put to a productive use. So we support the activity of our farmers to continue to be able to utilize that property for the foreseeable future. There may be some disruption to farming activities when installation of underground utilities happens, but it's one season, and very quickly that farm goes back into the land goes back into farming use. We do have the ability, we're not powerless to acquire land through friendly negotiation. We've done that in the past, but we also have the power under the Expropriations Act to acquire land where it's essential for us for a future road construction project or an infrastructure project. But as council may know, any of you have been through the expropriation process, it is very unpopular. It's difficult not only for the municipality, but it's very difficult in some cases for the landowners, and certainly has a significant impact on costs. So in talking to Dirk and putting this report together, and Wayne, staff is very confident that our request for land dedication is being applied uniformly and consistently, and is sound, is part of a sound planning process for us to acquire lands for public highways. Talked a little bit about flexibility within the policy. So it's not locked in stone. This is not something where in all cases we will always take all the way to that ultimate right-of-way limit. We do have cases where we would automatically reduce the amount of land being requested as part of these planning applications, so that we're not going to create permanent encroachments. So we don't want to take people's front porches. We don't want to be taking their, living rooms. We don't want to be acquiring septic tanks, those types of things. So we automatically reduce that requirement to a sort of a meter off of the closest point of those structures or those underground structures to the right of way, simply because it just doesn't constitute sound planning for us to be acquiring portions of buildings, acquiring maybe some environmentally sensitive type underground tanks and structures of that case. So we do have that ability. And as well, as I note in the report, the Planning Act doesn't really give us the ability to go in and seize property in that case. So again, we have flexibility within the policy, so we don't create those type of encroachment situations. So we summarize the policy again. The Planning Act gives this power to all municipalities for road widenings where the existing right-of-way is insufficient. We have consistently applied this to every Planning Act application that has come across my desk in my time here with the county over the past 20 years. And again, these are all sorts of different sizes and scopes. So we have some that are very small boundary adjustments to large type severances, commercial and industrial severances. We've been to the Ontario Municipal Board more than once. That's now the Ontario Land Tribunal. And we've successfully defended our position at those hearings. And again, it definitely conforms to the county official plan in its current format today, with regards to not only this application, but other applications through Planning Act. So just to talk specifically about Quadro, again, we've been working with Quadro Middlesex Center staff, and my thanks to the planners and the staff at Middlesex Center, and county staff have been talking to Quadro in some shape or form for over the past year about this station. And we've been clear with Quadro and the representatives about what would be required under the planning conditions in Middlesex Center and Middlesex County for this type of project, and not limited to the conditions of consent with regards to the county's position, but also with regards to the local position and local planning and zoning bylaws around these types of developments in agricultural areas. So we've been trying to work collaboratively with Quadro for quite some time on this project. Just for some specifics, the total area that would be dedicated across the retained parcel, I should also say that I jumped ahead here. The requirement of the setback, we've talked to Quadro. The county would be in favor of granting a reduction in the setback of the actual building from the road. We don't have a concern with the request for the reduction of the setback of the building from the road. And Quadro has always been on board with dedicating the lands on the severed portion where the office would be located to the county. So we're kind of limited to this sort of last point, which is the dedication of lands across the retained portion of the farm. Again, it's just under half an acre worth of land, and it's about 2.75, a little bit shy of that, of additional road widening that would be required. And again, my position is this is sort of a critical stretch for us. It's designated as a 4-lane arterial. We see traffic growth on Highbury Ave year after year after year. This is a main route from the City of London north. Those of you who are familiar with Thames Centre, Middlesex Centre in this area, there's not many roads that have a straight shot from the City of London all the way up to Highway 7. You have to go to Richmond Street. And then when you get into Thames Centre, because of the Thames River, there's a few spots where there's no crossing of the river. So in lieu of building new bridges and new roads, we've been looking to Highbury and sort of our planning horizon, the official plan, to anticipate traffic volumes to sort of grow, and that traffic demand to grow to the point where we would anticipate 4-laning that road. And in fact, when we rebuilt the bridge on Highbury a number of years ago north of Bryanston, we actually built a bridge that's wide enough to accommodate 4 lanes of traffic, to be forward thinking in that respect. And as we said, or as I said earlier in the report, not noted directly in this part of the report, this would create a change for this landowner. The landowner would still be able to utilize the lands that would be dedicated to the county to continually be able to plant crops and harvest crops off of these lands. The county has no immediate use for those other than perhaps for installation of some of this broadband. We haven't finalized the review of the engineering drawings with Quadro at this point, but regardless, this would not constitute, in my opinion, a reason for us to deny access to these lands being acquired as part of the public highway to this landowner. We have been working with Quadro as recently as the last couple of weeks with looking at alternative location potentials for this station. We've put Quadro in contact with some other landowners. I'm not directly privy to how those discussions have moved forward, but we are trying to work with Quadro to potentially find another location for this office where we may see a more cooperative or a more favorable discussion with the landowners to permit them to, or just for them to understand why the land dedication is so critical to the county along the stretch of road. And again, in our discussion with Quadro staff as recently as last week, the hopes was that additional information being provided to this landowner, and hopefully in the form of this report, and potentially them being able to view this county council meeting online, may give them some understanding of why it's important from a staff perspective for us to require the land dedication across the retained portion of the land, and hopefully have them better understand that they would not lose the use of this land, even though it would become part of the public right of way. They would be able to continue to use this land for the foreseeable future. So the recommendation from myself would be that the request for a waiver of the requirement of land dedication over the retained property along Highbury Road, as requested by Quadro as their delegation at the last council meeting, be denied. And certainly be happy to answer any questions, Madam Warden.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Any questions from council regarding this? I see Councillor Brennan.
To you, Madam Warden, to Chris. Chris, does it only apply when there's a planning act submitted, something under the planning act, that you get the road widening? Like, I'm thinking Medway Road when the water line went down it, or down Wonderland Road when the gas line went down it. Were you not entitled to any land when those projects went on because they weren't really under the planning act?
Through the word to Councillor Brennan, that's exactly right. And this represents the challenge we have with those types of projects. That water main line, the Lake Huron pipeline project on Medway Road, was challenging because we are having a very narrow right of way there. And we had no ability as a part of that capital project for us to acquire additional lands as part of the requirements of issuing the permits for that project. They were constrained to work within the right of way, and we had an obligation to the public good to allow them to install at a non-standard location along a Medway Road. So you're absolutely right. It's only during planning applications and only certain types of planning applications. So, and Dirk could provide more information, but things like rezonings, minor variances, those types of planning applications, we wouldn't have this ability. It's only for consents, site plan agreements, plans of subdivision, sort of major changes to the legal framework of the properties that allow us to require the land dedication for road widening.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Seeing none, we have a recommendation in front of us. Looking for a mover. Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Ropp. Any other questions? No. Anyone against? So carried. Thank you. And now we have 8E, the Long-Term Care Service Accountability Agreement, Annual Declaration of Compliance. And welcome, Brent. I see you're on the screen.
Thanks, Warden. Through you to Council. This is an annual item that appears before Council yearly and has appeared for several years now. The Lodge has a Service Accountability Agreement, also known as an LSA, with Ontario Health. It requires an annual council-approved declaration of compliance with the agreement. That's done through Appendix E of the agreement, which is attached to my report. Just to remind Council, the service agreement is a 40-page document. It's a requirement of all long-term care homes and other service providers in the province. It spells out a host of requirements that we are obligated to adhere to in order to continue the flow of provincial funding. It includes things like an inventory of our services. It includes things like the financial, statistical, and clinical data that we're obligated to report and when it's to be reported, etc. I, as Lodge Administrator, am certifying to the best of my knowledge and belief that the Lodge continues to fulfill its obligations under the service agreement. And I'm therefore recommending that the declaration of compliance document be approved for signing by the Warden on behalf of the Council or County. Happy to entertain questions with regard to that.
Okay. Council, any questions for Brent? Nope. Seeing none, we have a recommendation in front of us. That's Schedule E of the Long-Term Care Service Accountability Agreement be approved and the Warden be authorized to sign Schedule E on behalf of the County of Middlesex. Mover, Councillor Richard, seconded by Councillor Mayhew. Anyone against? Okay, so carried. Now the Albert Street Road Widenings confirmation. And Wayne, I believe that's you.
That is, Madam Warden, and thank you, and through you to Council. As set out in the written report, this is an administrative item with the Land Registry Office where I need Council's assistance with a bylaw. It involves 2 road windings on Albert Street, which is County Road 39 in Strathroy. The county owns the relevant widening lands, and it did dedicate them as public highway in 1983. However, for one reason or another, the bylaw wasn't registered on the title of the lands at the time, and the legal description in the bylaw was missing one small portion of the lands. So as set out in the written report, for development to occur in the area and registration of necessary easements to occur, I do need Council to approve the attached dedication bylaw, which includes the necessary legal description and repeals and replaces the 1983 bylaw. And I believe the written report and its attachments are clear, but I am happy to answer any questions if there are additional questions. And if there are none, my recommendation is that County Council pass the bylaw designating parts 1 and 4 as in 33R 939, part 1 and 2 as in 33R 556, and parts 8 and 19 as in 33R 19731 as municipal public highway.
All right, thank you, Wayne. Council, any questions for Wayne regarding this? Seeing none, looking for a recommendation then. Councillor Burkhart Jessen, seconded by Councillor DeVitt. Anyone against? No, so moved. Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you.
Now we have some time for councillors' comments and other business. So anybody feel like taking the floor? Councillor Elliott, go ahead.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship. The Women's Caucus had applied for a grant through FCM and the CanWIL program, which is Women in Local Leadership. We were successful in obtaining the grant to run an election school and encourage more people to run for municipal government this coming fall. And so we are hosting a countywide election school on Saturday, March 26th. It's going to run from 9 to 1 in Kamoka at the Wellness Center. If anyone would like to register or share the information with your residents and your networks, I'm happy to pass along the registration page. It is open to anyone interested in running in the upcoming election. We have guest speakers coming to talk about the roles and responsibilities of municipal elected officials, the election process, how to run a campaign, and everything like that. So we're really looking forward to be able to host that.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. And even though it's the Women's Caucus that applied for the grant, that election school is open for anybody. You don't have to show up in a dress. Everybody can attend. Okay, any other comments? All right, so moving, sorry, Councillor DeVitt, go ahead.
I should just note, thanks to all of the mayors or staff members that report through to your CAOs who are stepping up and pushing the information out there. I've had 2 calls this morning already about the schools, so getting everyone connected is obviously top of mind, and the support is appreciated. Thank you.
And I guess, Kelly, too, we need to tell everybody there's a free lunch, so they should really show up for the lunch at least. All right, and then we have our bylaws, and the first one is 10A, which is number 7151, a bylaw to dedicate lands as a municipal public highway, which is the Albert Street Road widening, and bylaw 7152, which is a bylaw to concede or to confirm the proceedings of February 22, 2022 meeting of County Council. So looking for a first and second reading. Mover, Councillor Mayhew, seconded by Councillor Elliott. Anyone against that? Now moving on to the third and final reading. Looking for a mover. That's Councillor Corneliuson and seconded by Councillor DeVitt. Thank you. Anyone against that? So moved. So now we're moving into the committee of the whole, and I'm looking for a mover that the council convene the committee of the whole at 1:33 p.m. So mover, please. Councillor Richard, seconded by Councillor Elliott. Anyone against that? All right, so now we're moving on to delegations, reports of county officers. The first being 11A1, Municipal Modernization Program, Intake 3, Funding Update. And Chris Bailey, our Manager of IT, this is yours. So whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Warden, through you to Council. Really quick report today, just an update on Intake 3 modernization funding. Intake 3 was actually announced at AMO last year, and we submitted 4 applications as I outlined to County Council on November 9th. On January 25th, Warden Warwick received notice from Minister Clark that all 4 projects that were submitted for as part of Intake 3 had been funded. I'm just going to quickly list the projects for you here. One was Middlesex County Community Services, Economic Development and Planning Departments submitted a review stream application regarding a Middlesex County attainable housing review. The county received up to $96,672 for that. The ITS department submitted a review stream application for an information technology services master plan and strategy. The county received up to $81,408 for that. Middlesex County Library submitted an implementation stream application for library services modernization and received $66,144 towards that. And lastly, there was a joint application submitted from Middlesex County, Middlesex Center, and Thames Center for the implementation stream regarding modernization of how budget reports are generated and presented to municipal staff, councilors, and members of the public. And that project received up to $33,702. In terms of strategic focus, because these projects are so broad, we cover a lot of areas here, which is great. Cultivating community vitality, connecting through infrastructure, strengthening our economy, and promoting service excellence. Recommendation today is that this report be received as information relating to intake 3 of the MMP program. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And I think that modernization money's been a great thing for the county, but also for the individual municipalities as well. It's been put to great use. So one of the better things we've seen in a few years. So thank you, Chris. Any comments or questions for Chris? Okay, we have a recommendation that the report be received for information. So looking for a mover, Councillor Mayhew, seconded by somebody. Come on. Councillor Burkhart Justin, there we go. Thank you. Anyone against that? Okay, so moved. Thank you. Now we're moving on to action items. 11B1, award of the hot mix asphalt paving and cold asphalt recycling. That was the report from Ryan. I don't think we need any more comments on that, do we? It's just no? Okay, so looking for a mover now. Come on, who wants to see those roads paved? Councillor Ropp, seconded by Councillor Brennan. Anyone against? And that this will be in the 2022 construction schedule for capital roadworks. Proceed as indicated in the budget. Thank you. Next, 11C, we have correspondence and information items, 11C1 through 11C7. Is there anything in those items anybody wishes to speak to? If not, then I'm going to ask for mover for information. So Councillor DeVitt, seconded by Councillor Richards. Anyone against? So moved. Any inquiries? All right, new business. So next is March 8th, 2022, and that is going to be a long and enjoyable day. And that starts with the budget at 10 a.m. And then we move to our regular council meeting at 1 p.m. And I believe everything will be in person. And I know our IT is going to have the lights on and the sound. So that will be great. So looking forward to that. And then any announcements? Okay, seeing none. Then I'm going to ask the committee of whole rise at 1:38 p.m. So looking for a mover. Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Richards. Anyone against that? Seeing none. And then here we go. Motion to adjourn. That would be, who's putting their hand up? Councillor Elliott, and seconded by Councillor DeVitt. So I know that everybody's in favor of that. So bye, everybody. Look forward